Welcome back. We have another feedback and review of a game submitted on Reddit. The players are Geordn and Dan. The individual on Reddit has said this is a silver and gold play of 39 minutes, with both of them being very abusive to each other and a lot of fun. As you can see from the graphs, they're very energetic, and a lot of stuff is going on here. Before we get into it, I do notice there's a lot of supply blocks right here at about the 7-minute mark and right here about the 12-minute mark. I would imagine either that is from bases being lost or some other action in-game versus mistakes by the players. The other mistake, the one I would call maybe a mistake, is right here, which we're looking in the first 2 or 3 minutes. Generally, you don't ever run into supply blocks during a game in that position at that time. So we're going to go ahead and jump right on into it. We're going to load up the game, and we're going to start looking at the playback of the silver and gold player. We have Geordn in red as silver, and went a little bit too fast for me. I love my computer sometimes. In the blue, Dan, who is a gold. First things first, let's make sure we have our construction screen on up so we can see what's going on. We have a little bit of an advantage on our red player, who's actually queued out an SCV out to the correct location. A little bit slow to get that supply depot down, but that's okay. No big deal. That does happen. I don't have any expectations. We're going to make sure we continue to build workers, all that kind of stuff. So good start out for Geordn over here in red. And in the blue side, same concept, just slightly different location. I personally prefer the closer area. Reason being is because you can lower that depot and you get slightly more resources as you do then travel down to your natural. He did not opt for a barracks off the hop, which is an interesting choice. He has instead queued up 5 SCVs. So this is definitely a mistake. You want to climb your tech tree, get yourself up as high as you can, as quickly as you can. Even queuing this many SCVs is a bad choice, just simply from the fact that you could alternatively be doing something like building a command center, get that refinery much sooner, so on and so forth. On the other side of the map, the red player is getting his barracks up, has 2 refineries, doing the most efficient method of gas collection, which is 2 in each. It is not the maximum usage of the refinery, but it makes it so that there's 0 downtime for your workers ever getting gas in these locations. The upside is if you have it parked out front, there's a little tiny bit of speed. There's a little bit of gap. You'll see that there's that bit right there that gets filled in with that other worker. So it's not as efficient, but it still occurs. Additional supply depots, teching up, getting Marines, grabbing a factory, but does not do anything with his tech line. Maybe skip the second Marine on queue. Maybe not do it in that order. Who knows? There's a lot of different possibilities of things that you could be doing. Red player is getting a command center off the location inside of his base. Blue player has just a bunch of barracks, bunch of Reapers. 3 racks Reapers is a real build. This is not the correct build order. We are looking at silver and gold. We kind of expect those kind of mistakes and shenanigans. You don't want an engineering pay. It slows you down. There's a lot of time that is delayed by simply not having these units immediately go across the map, which is the power of having a 3 racks Reaper versus having your opponent not have a factory out, be exposed because they're going to probably fast expand. Most people do. On the other side of the map, red has put his siege tank and several Marines, 2 siege tanks and several Marines, out in the open. Put them in a very, very lucky location. This is a 39-minute game. The Reaper comes on in. So we do have 3 racks Reaper doing a lot of damage here. Not really being microed too much. Marines focus firing a specific Reaper. Lots of stuff getting pulled off. Doesn't lower the barracks or the supply depot, making it so the run-in is very far. You see that he does come in, sets up his siege tanks at siege, and is able to clean up the Reaper rush. There are now Marines on the other side. If you're paying attention up here, you can see that they're under construction up here. Lots of stuff going on. Climbing the tech tree, getting their own tanks, as well as getting upgrades. Plus one attack is better. You usually want to do both at the same time. You usually want to have an armory so that you don't get stuck with +1, +0, or +0, +1, and you can continue to climb. That's generally why. Generally why you want to do the appropriate information there with your stuff. You have an idle SCV hanging out with your army. This has to do with probably how he defended. Unfortunately, that's just lost mining time and a lost worker. Good scan, checking out what's going on, sees a pretty decent amount of information. Not everything, but while doing that is floating a ton of resources. Doesn't have enough to actually survive against the fight that occurs here with the tank that's already pre-sieged. Unfortunately, in mirror matchups, especially against Terran versus Terran, you're going to either need a insurmountable advantage in unit comp and count, or you need to be very careful. And based off the play that these two individuals have presented, interesting. Double supply depot in the same location. I don't think I've seen that very often. Liberator just chilling. I think they're just trying to make sure that they don't have any air problems. Expanding into a third location, this is a great choice. I love Blue's decision making there. I would imagine you want to rally all of your buildings. Misses the rally with the one unit here. The sensor tower giving away all the information it needs. Oh, Liberator just slightly off location. As you can see, what happens even if you have a tank, the Marines do get clean, or the Marines do clean up a tank with the Marauders. And that's why you need that overwhelming mount, or you need to control it very, very effectively. Sorry, I'm going to reposition myself just slightly. Red is still floating a ton of money. That's like, what, 4 command centers ready to go, or about 10 barracks? It's a lot of money floating there. That should be put into infrastructure or be utilized to do things. I do like Blue repositioning himself, or Red repositioning to try and get an extra angle on his opponent. Doesn't see the charge, should have stayed in siege, would have been able to do extra there. Grabbing gas is very important in any Terran build after a certain point, unless you're going pure bio, specifically Marines as your primary. Income's getting hurt very heavily. I like the medevac coming in and healing the SCVs. I probably would have stayed with the units killing off either the medevac or killing off even more workers. As you can see, the income is 31 to 38 workers at 10 minutes. This is very below where you would expect. Most players usually have somewhere around 60 to 70 at this point. They should be topping out, maybe even getting up to 80 if they're really pushing to that into those numbers. I've seen upwards of 100 if you're Zerg. So just be aware that at this point in the game, you should be kind of close to maxing out fairly clearly. You have the income and you have the resources. You didn't even spend it, and you can still max out off of that information right there. So it's one of those kind of situations where the players are doing things that are extraordinarily defensive, but if a player that is a superior rank or has more experience or is better knowledgeable in the game decides to push, what they would end up doing is they would have a much larger army, pretty much double to triple the sizes of both of these players, and they would just go up the throat, and you'd be in so much trouble it's game over. That being said, oversaturation for Red. Oversaturation and no gas for Red, so Red is very light on gas. Still keeping that supply depot up, even though he can lower it and help himself out just a tiny bit. SCVs making their way across the map. Both players powering up. This is going to be something you expect to occur for everybody playing. It's just a question of how quickly they do it. The faster you're able to do it, the higher your rank, generally speaking. The exception being is if you are just crashing Hydras into the front door, or you run into a tank line, or you're not doing something that makes it so that you're, like, if you're 100% corruptors, right? I believe that we have SCVs still rallied down here. There is a couple, 3 tanks. Army gets dropped in, does have a whole slew of defense. Oh boy. Let's go ahead and back that up just a little bit. That looked like a fun fight. I'm going to slow it down a little bit. So we have, in the front, we have a bunch of Marines. Tanks will shred this. Marauders and Marines and some medevacs and some other things will make it very difficult, but these tanks will completely destroy this. Then you have the entire army over here. This is why you scan before you attacked. You did a really good job of doing that the first time that you were positioning yourself and attacking, but after that you've foregone it. You have a bunch of flying units coming over. No vision of the high ground because all of your air units are over here. You're flying into a ton of turrets. Your entire army at the front gets cleaned up before you even finish unloading. You end up clearing nothing because other than the one tank that was here, and losing several thousand resources over your opponent. Had you simply scanned and never actually gotten up into the main, or into the base itself, had you just sieged up down here, or kind of just charged with your army over here, not in medevacs, or you got on even ground and killed off like the Liberator, this would have been a much better fight. Maybe even positioning, clearing up some rocks, making sure that they don't ever take their 4th base, just simply making sure that you put a couple of units in all these locations just to keep an eye on everything you're doing. Pulling back, waiting until you are maxed out, that might have been a much better decision. Making sure you're expanding, I see that, very good job. Except for instead of expanding, when you have 1,200 resources, you're floating your command center. At this point, I would say that that was a mistake there. One of the things to make it so that you can get bigger and grow is you can get more bases. So build those extra command centers, especially since you've been doing a really good job with running your mules. Mules are very, and scans, which is a really, really powerful tool. It prevents you from walking into their army and being able to deal with cloaked banshees. Oh my goodness. This flock. So we have one army over here going across the middle, and another army floating around the edge is all cloaked that are going to be cloaked banshees. He sees the fight. Good job protecting the income advantage from ever occurring. I would probably even bring your tanks a little bit closer, take out these turrets, and you can get in on his production, which is what it appears you're doing. Awesome! That being said, he is able to see your army. Maybe it's time to move out, get yourself out before that all goes down. So many banshees. Oh no. That whole army is going to evaporate. Oh no, that's unfortunate. The Thor's high impact mode kills single units much, much, much faster. But shoots slower with regards to shoots faster, but does not do as well against a flock of units. So, like, these Banshees, when they were kind of stacked up and fighting, that the regular attack, which is just a missile launcher, is going to be better. But when they are loose like this, where they're all kind of spread out, which is often called magic boxing is actually a little bit wider than this, but the concept is the same. Where what that unit does is not stack up. The Thor's high impact mode is going to do a lot more damage to that because they are shooting at one at a time, etc. They're not trying to do AoE when all of it's spread out already. So just kind of things to think about when you have Thors is what mode they're in. I usually just leave them in high impact mode because they just do well either way. And the only time that you really want it in the non-high impact input, the regular missile mode, is because you're fighting something like a Muta player that's stacking everything, or somebody that is not very good at keeping things separated very much, obviously, in this situation. This Banshee player here, Dan, doesn't do a really great job of putting all of his units together, but he's the one with the Thors, so it's not really, it's a moot point in this game. But you can see that they're flying in this like weird, I would say weird, in this more loose formation. That's what magic boxing is basically you let the unit spread out and then you attack with them. Usually you use something like a hold command or something where they stop moving. That way they stay separated. Obviously these turrets are going to do a really good job of doing damage, detecting them, deterring them, but there are just so many. A couple of Liberators, that Thor, just crazy number of Marines with a scan would be great. Not perfect, but it's going to do the damage. You can see that he lost about 4 or 5 there. Go hit up our losses. We're at 5K versus 13K. We have bases expanding. We have now 5 bases for both players. Other than the fact that Red did pick up his from his main. I don't know why you would place this turret here. These couple of turrets here, you still want that gas. You're floating 800 resources that you desperately need, most likely later on when you're doing advanced tech. That's problematic. Your supply cap, that's where I was seeing that earlier. I was like, oh, they didn't, probably a mistake from the fight. It was a mistake this time. We made sure that we saw that, and it looks like the command centers did a really good job of alleviating most of that supply cap. And of course, we'll get all of it here. Problem solved. So both players are now in a situation where they're going to be getting all of their upgrades, maybe trading out some units if they decide to get more high tech. So like Marines are not very good against the tanks. The Banshees, they are going to do fine because there's just so many of them. You can see no scanning beforehand. Turrets kind of placed there. Liberator in a annoying position. Could probably go up this ramp. Could probably go up this ramp and get a better position versus trying to shove up this ramp where he's already got defenses, moving his army there because he did see stuff. Ooh, we're going to see a big old fight. That's a really hard call. I think blue has it. The tanks are going to clean up the Thors pretty heftily. But the Banshees, I think there's just enough in count to actually make it through. The Viking count is also high enough, so we have a Sky Terran, essentially against a ground Terran. Banshees did a good job of tanking for the Liberator, do a really good job of cleaning this up. You can see that slight advantage with that cloak, having a scan, those Liberators doing what they can. No Thors, nothing special there. Both players lose roughly 100 supply, so it is a pretty close trade total, but blue ends up having the advantage. Both players not really bothered to have anything to be able to follow it up with. They're in the process of their rebuilding, specifically Banshees, which if you know your opponent's going Banshees, time to kind of do something to make a counter. That would be your Thors. Has the ability, has the upgrades. You can see that blue is doing a really good job of getting basically every upgrade, while red is doing a pretty good job of getting his bio upgrades, and a little bit of his mech is missing stim. That's super important for red, and combat shield, which is also super important. I think had he had both stim and combat shield and actually utilized that, this fight would have gone very differently. Other things to be kind of aware of, you can see that there's stacking of resources that were happening. I think Dan actually caught those, did a really good job of that. You can see that he needs to update this group of units here. And again, I think the worker counts are kind of low. 44 to 79. That does give you a lot of headroom to get a really, 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 really big army. And that's why you build a bunch of command centers. It's called the Iron Bank. If you've watched many of the other pro players and casters and major games, because what you do is you get rid of basically all but the SCVs you need for gas. So probably about 20-ish. You kill off the rest and you put it all in supply, and you just use mules. And you can see what happens when you do that. The income spikes up to a crazy number. And then when it stops, you do it again, or whenever you run into a situation where you need more minerals. In this situation, obviously, Banshees are heavily invested in. But the home army is kind of thin. We have 48 Marines, 2 Ravens, and 3 Vikings, versus 3 Vikings, 24 Banshees, 3 tanks, which I think both 2 of the 3 tanks are down here, and there's a third one. And then just not quite the right composition. There's a Thor, though. Oh, let's go see what we have over here. You can see tons and tons of missile turrets being put up to protect the player appropriately. There's enough Banshees that they'll just go through all this. They don't care. The only thing that they really, really care about is Thors, maybe Vikings. Vikings are important. You gotta kind of kite away from those. Those are annoying to deal with. Doesn't do anything to kill the supply cap. Does do a good job of removing a lot of the valuable stuff. Doesn't produce anything else at home. Does have their upgrades going on the backside, which is great. But eventually, this army will be cleaned up, and the red player has lost almost no units. And all they have to do is literally F2 across the map, and they should be able to get through almost everything. You can see that we have a lot longer in the game. Red decides to pull back after doing that. Looks like he's going to throw away a unit or two, but that's okay. Ravens are hard to control. These are players that just don't have that skill set. Ooh, missile turret! What a freaking great play for a gold or silver player. Just getting that off right in the middle of that whole army. Having the wherewithal to have the appropriate army to protect or scan appropriately for any kind of vision impairment, aka cloak banshees. Middle of the map is pretty much buttoned up tight. I can see that very well. Most of us can see that. There's Thors, there's tanks, there's a bunch of banshees that keep coming out. But on the edge, the outskirts, we have really weak points. This is where you want to place one of our sensor towers. The reason that you want to do that is because then you know that this army is here. I do like that he's coming in, and it's going to come in with Marines primarily first. Does a good job of wiping out all of the workers, all of the income, getting rid of the building, making it so that the Iron Bank, if it existed, wasn't going to do a really good job, simply because they don't have the army, the base to actually do that. Oh, didn't focus down the tanks. Oh no. Thors would have gone down so quickly and so easily if we took out all of those first. Ends up having to run away after losing a huge number of units. Let's go ahead and look at our income. 23 workers versus 99. Red is fairly far ahead at this point. Red just needs to continue to produce things. Has a very large production setup. Has many bases. Has way too many workers on his most outskirt base here. But it's okay. His other side is pretty close to fully saturated. He's going to lose most of these workers. We look at our income. It's going to drop down. I think it was 80 something before this fight began. That being said, both players have a pretty good bank of gas. Both players are trying to engage, do the damage, make sure we push back. Thor is eventually going to go down. Thors can't really fight that many Marines, so both players are going to get back, reset. Blue has, during that fight, again, is not building very much, if anything. Red is moving another command center that he had hanging out. Again, could have taken this one. There's actually no resources here. This is a great one to move versus the one that actually has gas. Not a bad choice because there's no minerals, and he's actually mineral starved if you look up at the resources. That being said, he has a huge supply lead and is not taking any advantage of that, while Blue is still keeping his orbital command at home, continuing to expand. Good job putting down a planetary. That's really hard to break if you don't know how to do so. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, siege tanks. Other options are Thors. Thors will, about 3 Thors should rip through without losing too much. 4 is pretty much, you're just going to be able to destroy it, not a problem. Looking to punch through the middle yet again. I don't know if this is really the angle. Remember we talked about going up other locations. Liberator does go down. The turret, was that, I think, goes down. Widow Mine, be careful. Lots of tanks. Focus down on one of them. Fighting in a choke, you got to move all that forward. It's so hard. Getting another tank, good job. Another Thor goes down. Widow Mine going in. Lots of damage out. This looks like it's almost red, just getting it in the bag. Reinforcements are going to shut it down, but oh my goodness, he's got so much done. Oh my gosh, that's such a close fight. Losses for both sides are in the 40k range. My goodness. Lots of units that are lost. Production and Yamato for Blue is pretty limited. 5 BCs coming out. Red does not have anything that can combat this except for Marines. Again, I think he then needed to transition to the Thors. Oh my goodness, way too much on one orbital. Way too much there. I would probably expand here. And there has been no indication that he knows that this base is being touched. And you can see that he has no indication that he's been touched. It's dark color. But those BCs are going to be really hard to get through. Widow Mines are great for fighting BCs if you can get them to walk over them. Problem is you got to get them to walk over them, right? BCs walk right on in. See a bunch of Marines. They try and use a move, Cyclone. Does not do its Cyclone lock on if you do that. The BCs, oh my goodness, 7 health. Oh no. Widow Mines do a bunch of damage, which is great. Tank goes down. We now have a much different situation. Red thought he had it in the bag. Ended up losing a lot, but against BCs, he doesn't have the army. He needs Thors. Thors do counter BCs. We have 4 more BCs on the way. We're going to have 9 BCs total, if I remember correctly. 10. Woo! And we did get 1 out. I don't know if they're all right here. I think they're all right here. Oh, they're repairing it. Okay, I can see the SCVs at the bottom, which is what you want to do. Generally, you want to send more than 1 or 2 at a time to repair it, because then your opponent's going to do this. I love the Yamato against the Viking. You need to make sure you have 3-3. You cannot fight BCs if you don't have 3-3. Marines just get... There's so much armor there. Yamatos will eventually take out those Vikings. Wow, this is really unfortunate for the red player. He isn't able to handle BCs. Doesn't have the transition. Ooh, gonna take that base up there. 34 workers on 1 mineral patch. Oh no. At that point, I would just say select half, shift, click, click, and then right click over here, and then they will go flying over there. Looks like a rally is going on with some of these units. No, he's just sending them over there to be threatening. But at this point, I don't think Red has the ability to even break this planetary fortress at all. I just don't think he has the power, the ability to. And these BCs will eventually... Orbital finding out what's going on there. You're going to have Vikings getting taken out at this point. Thors and Vikings is all he should be producing. No more Marines. Marines are just like dead weight in this. If you have the gas, you want to build those. The only reason you build Marines is you're out of the gas. Obviously, you've done a really good job of gathering it. Lots of middle workers getting the gas if you can. You're going to probably chase them down, and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. This game is pretty foregone at this point. That being said, it was a very well played game for both players. They transitioned a few times. Red did tech up pretty well. Blue saw the writing on the ground. Yeah, he even says BC transition. Whoa, that's tough to get through. The Sky battle versus the non-Sky is going to always be challenging. Vikings can eventually kite this if you have enough, but you got to make sure that the Yamatos don't take you out, which he's actually doing a very, very good job. Oh my goodness. Is he going to actually, like, make this happen? He's too close to the Vikings. He needs to run away more. Oh no. Marines trying to do their thing. Too much stim already happening. More Vikings need to be made, but using the Marines. Oh no. Does everything in his power to make it happen. Eventually, I would imagine he taps out. There it is. What a good game between these two. Things that I did notice that I would suggest is think about your time consumption, right? It's how quickly you get to things. We were looking at like 100 supply at about the 10-minute mark. I know that I skipped really far back, so it's going to take a minute to get there. But if you look, most players that are professional or in that range, remember, we're talking those high-end gamers. This is not you. This is what you aspire to be, I would imagine. That's or in your enjoyment of the game. In order to become a better player, at about that 10-minute mark, your goal should be about a 200, or at least a 150 army supply where you're buttoned up and you're protected and you're on at least 3 or 4 bases. So at this point, you can kind of tell that this game is one player is going to struggle a little bit against the other if they're not ranked properly. You guys are both in that weird, I'm learning how to play the game, I'm trying to understand certain things and learning things. So your matches are going to be pretty close pretty often, just simply because one of you, if not both of you, have not figured out how to transition into doing that build up to a 200 by about this minute, 11 minutes into the game. You should be on final level tech. You should have already done some damage to your opponent if they are not able to handle it. If you're playing against somebody that's, the equivalency of bronze to yourself, you'd be able to probably win the game at this point. Most games that professionals play, if they're not playing against professionals, last about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, unless the players are like really, really buttoned up. When I say that, I mean like your siege tanks, you have like multiple depth of it. You have the appropriate army to respond to things. You have spotter features, so you might have like a Viking patrolling over here, maybe another Viking patrolling over here because you'd have this as your third. Maybe you have a spotter Marine hanging out in these locations. You're not using F2, you're using your control groups, all that good stuff. That being said, you look at the control groups. Geordn, you're clearly using them. And blue player, I would suggest putting your entire macro army, like all of your production facilities on hotkeys. That will make your life a lot easier. I personally am not a professional, obviously, but I like to place all of my production on the same key, and I just tab through it. The professionals, what they do is they separate it out. So they'll go like 3, 4, 5. 3 is barracks, 4 is factory, 5 is starports. And they'll put all that stuff there. Maybe they'll shift it over more. Maybe it'll be like 1 and 2 are army. So you can do 2 different groups at the same time. Then you have 3 as your command centers, 4 as your barracks, your 5 as your factory, and your 6 as your starports, or something like that, where they kind of like separate it out and they can just like quickly get to each one. And that's important to note. Also, when you're floating this many resources, just build extra command centers, build extra supply depots, build extra production. Just like spend that money. I would look at it and say anything over about 500 to 1,000, you just pick on your own skill level. Make sure that you just spend it. You don't care what you spend it on so much as you do spend it. The other thing that I did notice is that you did a good job of scanning. Red did a good job of scanning beforehand, and Blue did a good job of putting up some barriers on his main 3 bases. This one here is really well buttoned up. This area for a long, long time was pretty well buttoned up. And then you had sensor towers, turrets, all that kind of stuff. So what I would do is I'd take this line and expand it out as you grow. And that way you have multiple lines to fall back on. You can unsiege your tanks, move them forward, set up a second. Always have at least 2 rows of tanks because you want them to be able to jump on your stuff, and then you just blast them. The other thing of it is like, if you want to continue to extend that line, right? You have a sensor tower here. Well, put a sensor tower here. That way all of this space out here that they're coming at you. So you can take the army that you have here that's centralized and move it over here to protect yourself. Or you could split off a big chunk and then split off another chunk so you're ready for the army that's coming this way, and you have a two-side attack. You're able to have it because you'll have another sensor tower here or maybe over here. And that way you're able to expand your vision and have a good idea of what's on your mini map, which sensor towers is awesome for that. It gives you a great idea, long heads up. It's a very useful tool. Really great for somebody that's a little more turtley. And then, of course, we talked about it during the actual game, is that make sure that you are doing what you can to pressure after you win a fight. Maybe that's making sure they're off a base, like pushing them off this base, or making sure they don't have this base, or checking the scout around. Every time you get in a fight, you want to go see what your opponent's done behind it. If you're the one that lost, you need to defend as best you can until you can get out 1 or 2 scouting units, like a Hellion or a Marine or 2. Literally just click around the edge of the map, find out where your opponent is. Nobody knew that this base was used or not used for over 30 minutes. This base, we don't know if it's used or not used until just now at 30 minutes. This base wasn't known until it was being used, until an orbital ran into it at about 35 minutes. So that is a long time for them to clear out all of those resources and have a big advantage, army size and resource-wise, over you, because they literally just were there and you weren't able to handle it because you weren't present. Other things to note is I'd probably transition a little bit sooner out of the Banshees. Blue. Once it goes down one time, probably done. You did a really good job with this player, but if you notice, there's a lot of stuff that was on defense. And for both players, when you're in combat, make sure you're producing things behind it. If you notice, red has stuff being produced here, blue doesn't. Imagine if blue had more stuff under production with that 2.5k, 1.5k bank. That army is going to be huge and able to actually do some damage. Maybe shut down this base, shut down this base. And that's why you scout, you send that one Marine or that one Hellion or whatever unit around the map. And that's also why you make sure you're producing things. Obviously, the battle cruiser transition is awesome. You spent all of your bank. So awesome to watch. I am very impressed with that. Unfortunately, you put yourself in a vulnerable position. You didn't repopulate your tanks, and they were able to get in your face and actually take out one of your bases that were mining. And theoretically, had they been just a tiny bit faster, they could have killed you, right? Like all of this stuff moving, making sure that they had gone down here, cleaning up everything, and just running away from the BCs versus trying to fight it. BCs are very slow, so if you can get around and do a lot of damage, like, hey, this Marauder over here should have just kept going. He can't shoot up. What is he doing over there? Who cares, right? I'm not asking you to... I mean, I know these things are things that you're like, oh, I watched the replay. I know this stuff. I suggest watching replays, seeing what you did well, didn't do well, etc. So I do like this pullback. This pullback was awesome. So cool. At this point, I'd have already started transitioning the Vikings. You saw the BCs. You know it's coming. Marines are no longer useful. You need to be Thor, Vikings, and that's all you want. Make sure you rally everything at home. Get yourself back up to 200, so that way you can actually fight your opponent. Also, long-distance mining is okay. I know you don't know he's here. So if you'd taken like 5 of those and sent them down here just to check, and then pulled back or lost them after finding the base, that would have been really, really, really helpful for you. Removing vision like the sensor tower is, I would argue, more important than taking out the turrets, simply because you didn't have anything that was flying and you're just sending in Marines. Again, Thor's Vikings, that's all you want. We talked about how your supply was, with all of your workers, were very focused. In some locations, you did a really good job of getting yourself up back into the income here. You went from 100 or so resources a minute to over 1,000 very, very quickly. This is the power of mules for those of you who have never seen it. That's so much money. And this was I'm sorry I didn't catch it during the original play. I was too busy watching this fight over here. You can see that the command center is flying over there, goes, oh crap, turns around. And the BCs come in after fighting and doing a pretty good job. Number of Vikings that were here was awesome. I loved it. It was really great. You did a really good job of fighting this. You actually got down to only 4 BCs, so if you had not built all of those Marines with all those minerals, you just built straight Vikings, which, again, if you have all of those producing stuff and you had them all off to the side, away, hidden, you could theoretically have gotten through all of them. I know there's a lot of BCs. I know it's not fun to fight them if you don't know. Thors are also great because they're able to do that tons of damage that you're looking for. All right. I'm going to go ahead and look one more time at our graphs over here. Oopsie. You can see that we have a very robust game. Supply blocks in this area were all about just not having the supply, but it was at a much higher supply cap in this area. This area is just a slight mistake. They were focusing on the fights and repositioning and things like that. Again, great game. Both of you did very well, and I look forward to seeing what else you all can do. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and thanks for watching.